Well, at first, after Pearl Harbor, I tried to enlist in a program to become a pilot. And the doctor wanted me, he had two tests that he wanted to give me. He wanted me to say the seashells, she sells seashells by the seashore. Well, I was a young, excited kid going to get in the Navy, was going to learn to fly. And, well, I messed it up. So it didn't come out that way. So he tried me on another one. The ragged rascal went around the rugged mountain. And so he excluded me, or I didn't pass the test. Said I wouldn't be able to use a microphone in the Navy. So what I did, I joined the Navy, and what did I join as? A radioman. But it was kind of a fortunate thing, because there was a Captain Eddie who had organized what a system of instruction. You would go in the Navy 6 weeks, you would be studying the mathematics of electronics, and then it was another 6 months after that. He had it all set up, either a spot in Bellevue, or if you were going to go into the Air Force, which I elected to do, down at Corpus Christi. And it was quite a good test. In fact, quite a good course, because it helped me greatly when in my work later on. I was a sonar systems engineer for Honeywell. And I volunteered to go to the Eastern Pacific Atlantic part of the Navy. So what's more natural for the Navy but to send me to the Pacific? It just works out that way. Oh, that was the nearest place to where I lived at the time. So it was an easy choice, because I joined the Navy there, and then went through the Eddie test and all that. And I, at a point now, looking back, Amelia Earhart, she had the wrong equipment in her plane. There was an RU series and a TU series utility. One receivers and transmitters, and she didn't have the right equipment to be heard on her trip around the world. And of course, I think she learned that if she had picked a different navigator who wasn't drunk all the time, would have been considerable help. But he and I, during the war, went through the same course, and he wound up to be a dentist with the GI Bill. I wound up in engineering. Not the base itself, but the south part of Lake Washington. There's a PBM that sunk. It sunk. And the first thing the Navy did was strip the divers, go down and got the machine guns off of it. It was a patrol plane. I was a repairman, repaired radio and radar equipment. And we had to fly 4 hours every month to get our pay, flight pay, as they call it. And so I was on an airplane somewhere between 4 and 8 hours every month. And it was just right. Now keep in mind that the radioman's position, the radar transmitter was right underneath the radioman's seat. So I got a free vasectomy. I passed this test for a third class radioman, and went into this Eddie course that it was called at the time, and worked my way up to first class, and then chief coming back from Guam. This was basically the end of World War II. I came up to Seattle, where I was discharged the first time. And my mother was waiting at the door, or at the entrance to our place down there. Paid off the taxi. She came down. First word she said to me, "You look so old." Well, I had been seasoned just a little bit. The enlisted club, I think they had one end of a hangar somewhere. They weren't exactly, now the officers club, that was totally different. My boot camp initially over there at Brentford was 10 days, only 10 days. They wanted to squeeze people out, and they wanted bodies, I would say. My uncle, who had been chief of police in Yakima, and he and I were on good terms, and often went over to chat about things. Had not World War II come along, I'm sure I would have been in his police force. And he had been a Marine in World War I, and he knew how to give orders. Well, after the 10 days, I went over to visit my uncle. He was put in charge of all the security in the whole base. And so I went over to see my uncle, and he invited me in his office, and we chatted what I was going to do in the Navy. He was kind of somebody I looked up to, and he was giving me a lot of advice, good advice, as we were chatting. And noon time came up. "Would you like to have lunch with me?" So, yes, I said. So we went over to the O Club, the officers' club. And boy, in my little sailor suit, did I feel way out of the place. But nobody dared say anything to him, because he was full commander and in charge of all the security there. Nobody said a word to us, but I was one shaky kid. Reasonably short, yeah. I was there only during the Korean thing. The armed forces found out that the pilots that they would have depended on for the Berlin airlift didn't want to sign up. And so they opened, the Navy especially, opened up a NAVCAD course, Naval Cadet. And so I always kind of wanted to learn to fly, and so I signed up for that. That early desire to fly had never left me, so I mentioned to my skipper, I mentioned I had heard that the Navy has opened up this NAVCAD program. What were my chances of getting onto that? I was a chief then, and before I knew it, I was at Pensacola. It was, well, the Navy had set out for recruitments simply because they didn't have enough pilots. They did have enough pilots, but most of them were taking advantage of the GI Bill. They didn't want to leave all that training again, go over that again. And I had taken full advantage of the bill. I have a physics degree, undergraduate physics degree. And so there I was at Pensacola, suddenly learning how to fly. and doing a good job. My academic grades were very good. My flying grades were even better. But there's one incident that happened that made me wonder if I really wanted to stay with this. Was the Navy really the honorable profession that I wanted to think it to be? Well, it wasn't. I was coming back from a flight exercise solo, and I was the beginning of the downwind leg. When you're on the downwind leg, you stay on that downwind leg under threat of death. Because, well, there was a farmhouse that was the entrance to this downwind leg. Now, there was an instructor off to my right with his student, and they're moving in. He was moving in and tried to push me off the downwind leg. I wouldn't push out of the downwind leg, because had I done so, I'd be right in the path of planes taking off. Not a good situation. So I did not move. I stayed. And the way this pilot trainer just jerked the plane, his plane, around out of the... I knew he was going to put me on report. So I stayed on the downwind leg, completed my landing, parked the plane, went over to the duty officer's desk and just stood there, because I knew he was going to put me on. Sure enough, NavCAD West, report to... Anyway, there I was. Well, fortunately, the duty officer believed my story, didn't believe the flight instructor's story, and so I was removed from the report. But I got to thinking, now, at that time, the Korean War was not in the picture. And so the outlook that I would have would be probably completing a 4-year source of duty at some time. And what's the job prospects? Probably a co-pilot in a transport somewhere. So, hey, this is not going to work. And I could quit the contract, and go back to college and complete my physics degree, or stay in the Navy. Well, I had to see the admiral even to get out of the service. And I did not tell what had happened. I didn't report this instructor that was trying to push me out of... I didn't want to be a snitch. Its closing, I remember that very well, and I thought, oh, what a waste. In my view, is their aviation being one of the outlets for adventure, if you will. What things are you aware of that would stimulate a young, active mind? Flying is certainly one of them. And we need things like, we need outlets for young kids who give vent to their imagination. Certainly flying was for me, anyway. And four Y-1s. Anyway, the pilot, he wanted to take his plane out for a training cruise, a training flight for his crew, and that's a good idea. But he couldn't, he wanted to get off at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's fine, but he wanted all the shops manned so that if we had any trouble, we could fix it right away. Well, I was head of the electronic shop, and he sent a message to me. He wanted the chief of the shop to come out to his plane. Now, I had a line crew out there anyway to catch any gripes. This is typical. So he didn't want anybody on the line crew to come in and check out. He couldn't contact the tower. And so he got a message that he hadn't me come out there, though I hustled out there as fast as I could, a quarter of a mile away. Didn't have a bicycle or anything, and we had bicycles on the, but I didn't have one for the shop. There was generally no need. So, line crew wouldn't do, so message, well, he wanted the chief of the shop to come out there. So I did, tick, 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 tick. Got in the plane, moved up to the, where the cockpit was and where it was, and I just instinctively, as I went in, flipped the master radio switch on. And I contacted the tower. Here, sir, I don't think you'll have any further trouble. And I left before he could say anything. That was at Sandpoint.